afternoon. My name is Dr. Homero Salinas at Lincoln University. Uh, we are very pleased to be having today Jennifer Lutz from Missouri University Extension. She will be talking also about economics, very important things ever, but especially now during the winter. And we are working remotely. At least Lincoln University is closed because of the snow, but we are here. So thank you so much for being with us. And so Mohan, Gabe, you want to introduce yourself? And later on, Jennifer.
Welcome everybody. I'm Mohan Acharya. I work as an extension. Pretty much most of my programs are in collaboration with Dr. Salinas. And thank you all being here, and thank you, Jennifer, for providing your expertise. Everyone, welcome. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Gabriel Apple. I'm the small ruminant program educator that works with Mohan and Dr. Salinas here at Lincoln. I wanted to make a couple of announcements. We already let you guys know that we are working remotely, so unfortunately I don't have my list so that I can do our raffle for the book today. However, I will take care of that once we get back into the office, and whoever is the winner, I'll send you an email so that you can pick out which book you'd like to have. Also, since this is a certificate that we are trying to complete with anyone that wants to get a certificate from finishing all of the videos, we do ask that you guys put your first and last names either by changing your name or in the chat, put your first and last name so that I can take attendance. I'm keeping attendance here, and I'll update my list whenever I get back to the office. So if you have any concerns about that, you think that you were in one of the videos and maybe your name wasn't updated, please feel free to reach out to me. So.
Okay, Jennifer.
All right, welcome everybody. It's nice to see a lot of people here. And I see that it's not just from Missouri. We've got Texas and South Dakota, and I thought I saw Kansas and Illinois, and so welcome from all around. I'm Jennifer Lutes, and I do work for the University of Missouri Extension. This group with Lincoln and I tend to collaborate quite often. I appreciate all the work that they do for our small ruminants, and I'd like to contribute as I can. As an ag business specialist, I tend to focus on the numbers and the dollars and cents and marketing and those pieces of it. And I let these guys really focus on production aspects as we all need it. So, are you ready for me to get started, Homero?
Yes, please.
All right. So let me get my screen shared again here. All right. So, today we're going to talk a little bit about price trends for sheep and goats, kind of what we've been seeing and what's happened over the last year or so. And also, I'm going to talk about some tips for marketing our culls and how do we improve our prices for marketing culls. A little bit of background on me is I did complete a master's in ag economics at the University of Arkansas, and so that is where a lot of my knowledge comes from. All right, we'll start off on the sheep side of things. I try to separate the sheep and the goats as much as I can because I always get tongue-tied talking about lambs and kids and ewes and does. And so I try to separate them as much as possible to help my brain stay on track a little better. Starting off with a bunch of charts here. First, we're going to kind of talk about the sheep and lamb slaughter. So this is your federally inspected national sheep and lamb slaughter numbers. And as we look at these graphs, something I kind of want to point out for y'all on these that have these red and then blue dots is that the blue line is going to be your 2024 line. The dotted line is going to be your 2023 line. And the red line is an average of 5 years from 2018 to 2022. And those will all be similar as we go through any of the graphs that look like this. So this particular one is 1,000 head per 1,000 head. So if you look kind of on that average, we're sitting somewhere between 35 and 40,000 head weekly. And what I really want to point out here is that we're pretty well on that 5-year average. We've had a few months that are over, we've had a few months that are under, but by far and large for 2024, we were on average. Few weeks out of the year in 2023, we were a little below average. Something else I kind of want to point out here, if you notice these two peaks on the red, but somewhere between March and April, is that generally coincides with Easter. And this year, coming up in 2025, Easter falls on April 20th, which is fairly late for Easter, considering in 2024, it was March 31st. And the year before that, I want to say it was early April. So keep in mind that these peaks really do try to fall close to Easter. If we pull out of that, something I didn't say about the previous slide is it was lamb and sheep. So on this one, we're actually just pulling out and looking at the mature sheep, and we've stripped the lambs out of this. This is still in 1,000 head. And so you can see somewhere on average, we're right around just shy of 2.5 thousand head each week. But you can see that in 2024, our blue line here, really we're peaking above our average and above what we were doing in 2023. We were slaughtering more mature sheep in 2024 than we had in the last 5 to 6 years on average. And so that's going to kind of come into play as we start thinking about some of these things, is that as we slaughter more sheep, we're definitely going to have less lambs out there unless we've held a lot of replacements, which I can kind of tell you we haven't. So we are going to start seeing a little bit less lambs in inventory because we've been slaughtering our sheep. If we look at our dressed weights to see how much these animals have weighed, so this is now in pounds, and you can see that in 2024, our dressed weights were lower than our 5-year average, and slightly lower than some of our 2024 or 2023 weights in early 23, but a little bit heavier than our late 2023 weights. So our average is somewhere around 66, 67 pounds for the year, and you can see that in 2024 we were sitting closer to the 62 pounds as our live weight slaughter. Sorry, that was a dressed weight slaughter. And then finally we get into some pricings. So this is on the dollar per hundredweight, and what we're seeing is in 2024 we have been slightly above average during our summer months. Then we were that 5-year average. This is a 2019 to 22 average. But 23, we were definitely below that average in early 23, kind of came up to average in late 23. And, I expect this to kind of continue this trend. If you remember back in 2020 and 2021, we had some really high prices that are really kind of bringing up this average. And this will really point this out here in this next chart. So this is a 3 market average that LMIC produces. So this is Colorado, Texas, and South Dakota. And that's a 60 to 90 pound market range. If we look strictly at San Angelo, Texas, and this is again a 60 to 90 pound, but this is now specific to choice and prime, we can see over the last 10 years that we were pretty steady going before COVID. And then really once COVID hit, our prices increased. We had those price increases mostly because of some supply chain issues, and also coupled with some drought and wildfires out of Australia. So our imports had lowered dramatically about this time, and thus bringing up our prices. We've had the correction in the market once we got trade reestablished and imports coming back in. And now I think we're coming back to this normal trend line of what we had previously. Something new for this year is I am finally able to have a 5-year look back at Missouri prices. And so I pulled our strictly Missouri prices And that's that same choice and prime. These are the 5 USDA marketed livestock auctions that happen in Missouri. And I pulled 60 to 90 pounds, choice and prime 1-2 slaughter lambs. And you can see that our prices really reflect trend. I'm not exactly sure what happened in 2023. We were lower than the San Angelo average by more than we are in other years. So, but we're pretty consistent with San Angelo within, about 15-cent change. Now, this is a chart that is really quite a lot once I unveil the whole thing. And I really wanted to take a second and point out 2 years worth of data on here before I throw all this data at you. And so what we're looking at here, this side of the graph and these bars will be our year-over-year percent change. And this is by month. And so in January of 15, we had a roughly 2% year-over-year change from the previous January, so January of 14. By December of 15, we were actually seeing roughly 8% lower prices than we saw in December of 14. And so that's kind of how this chart will look. And what it'll kind of look like once we unveil this is whether we're increasing in prices or decreasing in prices. And so you can see the first half of 2015, we were really increasing from prices over the previous year. But then we get down to the last half of 15 and we were actually below prices from the previous year. This blue line is the average monthly price as we track along, and it's actually marked on the right-hand side of this graph in dollars per hundredweight. And so as we unveil this, you'll be able to see kind of how prices change, dollars per hundredweight, and how it compared to the previous year. And like I said, there's a lot of data on this graph. That's why I wanted to give you a second to kind of acclimate to it before I unveiled the whole thing. What I really like about this graph is that as we watch this blue line, we can see our seasonal price variations every year as we move through here. 2015, we actually didn't have a lot of seasonal variation, which is interesting, but that was because we were trending back down in prices. But almost every year you can see this seasonal price change as it occurs throughout the year. And as we talk about these seasonal prices, I really want you to pay attention to these peak years that we had here. You can see that in, January of 20, well, even in 2019 with Australia's drought, we had prices, year-over-year prices that were almost 50% higher than the previous year. And then you come over here in 21 and we were a good 40% higher than the previous year. And coming out of this, I was saying, hey, we're going to see some price corrections because this was a market anomaly that was happening here. And you can see we get over here in late 22 and early 23, and this is where those price corrections really happened. We started getting our trade back. We started getting our imports back into the country. And, the demand for our lamb wasn't as high because we had more lamb meat in the market. But we are still seeing the seasonal variation in prices, and it's pretty dramatic at times. Okay, so that brings me to our seasonal price index for sheep. This is specifically for slaughter lambs, our choice and prime 1-2s, in that 60 to 90 pound market range. This is for the San Angelo, Texas market, or based on those prices. I tend to set things for the San Angelo market when I talk about here in Missouri, because here in Missouri we do have mostly hair sheep, and I think this market is more representative of what we have here in Missouri versus the Colorado or South Dakota markets, which are mostly selling wool sheep. So what I want to point out here on this index, so on our 1, this dotted line that goes across, that means that is the average annual price for the year. As we look at January, we can see it's got about it's a 1.15. That puts it about 15% above the average annual price. And so in 2024, our average annual price was $249 per hundredweight. And so if we come up here to 110 or 10% over, it brings us to 274 per hundredweight. So essentially what that means is between January, which was our high price for the year, and July, which was our low price for the year, we had a 27% price swing on these animals, or roughly 73 cents per pound. And that's pretty significant. So if you were to sell in July and you could have sold those animals in January, you have just lost 73 cents a pound, which is a pretty significant change. All right, Homero, I am ready for our first poll.
Okay, let me see. I think I have a problem here, Jennifer. I don't know why. Go ahead, and I will be making again the polls because I don't know what happened. Yeah.
No problem. Maybe. Might be a problem. Let me get back to, well, shoot dang. There we go. All right. Okay. So some of the things I wanted to talk about today, and I've already touched on some of this to an extent, but not really. Some of the things I really wanted to talk about is our common lamb and sheep market classes, because I realized as I was putting together the culling stuff that maybe I've not explained that in the past. And if you guys all know this already, then hopefully you'll just bear with me. But what I really wanted to talk about is, I keep losing my screen here. Sorry, guys. Is, on our market reports, oftentimes you will see different classes. So choice and prime 1-2s, choice and prime 2-3s, good 2-3s, utility and good 1-3. And I wanted to make sure that everybody knows what that means. And so essentially, these are quality and yield grades. And quality essentially is how good will it be? How good will the meat be? How tasty, how palatable, how flavorful, those types of things. And yield is how much usable meat will we get off a carcass. And as we think about this, choice and prime, so prime is our top grade. And most of us that have ever eaten beef understand that prime is our top grade. And so choice and prime 1-2 would be animals that will grade out, they believe will grade out in that choice and prime quality and have a yield grade of 1 or 2. And to kind of elaborate that further, our quality grades are here on the screen now. And this graph that you're looking at is based on maturity, so how old the animal is. And this is, don't think about in like months or days of how old the animal is. This is how old is the skeletal and muscular features of the animal. And so they break this down between young lamb and older lamb, and then yearling mutton and mutton. And keep in mind that the other side of this is the degrees of the degrees of flank fat streakings. So essentially how much fat this animal has along its flank and how old the animal is. And that determines our quality grades. And prime is the best eating there is, and cull is generally the worst eating there is. Prime is equivalent to the most fat, and cull is the equivalent to the least fat. And so as we go through our maturity and our degrees of flank fat, note that our mutton will never be prime. Mutton will never be prime. The fattest mutton that we have, most abundant fat flank streakings, can only be graded as choice. Okay, so we have to have lambs and yearling mutton in order to make it into the prime category. Also note that our young, older, and yearling mutton will never be a cull category. The lowest quality category they can get into is that utility category. And this is all based off of visual inspection of a carcass. And so we won't know these grades when we send them through a live auction, but we do a visual inspection of the animal and kind of make a guess at how they're going to fall into these quality grades. When we talk about yield grades are slightly different. So yield grade is the estimated percent of closely trimmed retailed cuts. And when we say closely trimmed, what we're meaning is that we are trimming the fat to, let's say a 1/4 inch or a 1/2 inch or whatever that request is from the customer. But that is what we consider closely trimmed. Some of these cuts may be boneless cuts, but some of these cuts also may be boned in cuts. But remember, yield grades are really how much you're going to get off of a carcass. And so a yield grade 1, this yield grade 1 with the least amount of fat is going to have the most closely trimmed retail meat yield off of a carcass. And the reason behind that is because the more fat we have, when we closely trim those cuts, the more we're actually going to throw away, and it's not going to be sold with the retail cuts. Okay, so a yield grade 5 is the most fat and the least yield, or the lowest yield.
I'm ready with the questions, whatever you want them.
All right, go right ahead.
Okay. Are you seeing the question?
Yes.
Okay. One of the questions here will be, whatever the best month to be selling animals, you say 60 to 90 pounds. So when do you have to breed your animals to get those lambs to be sold in that month? That will be answering the people now. I think they are ready. I will be ending the poll now. You want to give some feedback, Jennifer?
Yeah. So the most answered was January, and that is correct. That is the highest month according to our price index. We like to think April is our highest month for pricing, but it's actually a little bit lower. And I suspect that is because we do take a little bit of time to get those animals to market. So let's go back to this slide real quick. So our price swing, our price index, note our highest index was here in January and our lowest was in July. So if we look at April, we're coming close to the average annual price for the month. And this is our 60 to 90 pound slaughter lambs. And Easter is our biggest month, biggest holiday, but there's a lot of holidays that happen between the first of the year and Easter. And there's a lot of times that people also eat lamb. But this is probably our highest price point because we're getting our stocks ready for Easter. So it takes a little bit of time in the supply chains to get the lambs from the livestock auction and ready for the consumer. And then if you talk about what month you have to breed your animals in, well, if we need a 60 to 90 pound lamb in January, then we've got to back that up 5 months for gestation, and then probably 5 to 6 to 8 months of growth depending on how fast your lambs can grow. Does anybody have any thoughts or questions there before I move on?
So just for clarification, what month do you think they need to start breeding?
Thanks, Gabe. You couldn't do that math for me. So if we want to sell in January and we have to back it up 5 months, that puts us to what, August? So we've got gestation in August. We back it up another 6 months, 5 months, 6 months. That probably puts you around February, March of the previous year, right? So 10 months prior.
Awesome. Thank you.
Testing my math skills today, Gabe.
Make sure that you know your months.
Okay. All right. So we'll move on then. I don't see any questions. All right. So if you wanted to learn more about some lamb quality grades and carcass characteristics, I highly encourage you to go out to the lamb board, and it's lambboard.com/quality. They do have some pretty nice videos, short videos that they've got out on YouTube that really talk about the carcass characteristics and USDA yield grading. And now let's talk about what we can do with our cull ewes. Okay, so we said that cull animals, really mature ewes, mature lambs, mature sheep cannot be prime. So notice you're not going to find prime on this graph. But as we look at the estimated income and maybe a quality premium for a 90-pound ewe in our Missouri auctions, you can see that there is a clear difference between our cull and utility classes, our utility and good classes, and then our just simply good classes, okay? And as we look over time, this is our dollar per head. You can see that in 2022, when we peaked, we were getting about $140 head for our cull 90-pound ewe. As we come over here to 2024, our prices have gotten a little closer together than they were in 21 and 22, but we still get a premium if we can get a good quality ewe to market. And so what does that really mean? If this is our dollar per head up here, well, this is the premium down here. So if we sold an animal that was in a cull or utility class and we were able to get that animal fed up and into the utility and good class, in 2024, we could expect about a $25 return on getting that animal up to that next class. If we were to take an animal from a cull utility class up to the good class, we could expect just shy of a $40 premium for getting that animal up there. And so it might make sense to feed some of these animals up to the next class if we can feed them for cheaper than the premium that we're going to get. Another thought behind how do we add value to our cull ewes is maybe we direct market some of this meat to people that like mature sheep meat. And there are people out there that do like it. So if we got $88 per head for our good quality animal and our market price for 2024, if we were to sell that to our direct consumer, so this comes out of our USDA Ag, this is their national monthly grass-fed lamb and goat report. And you can come down here, you can see the retail prices per cuts. And I know some of y'all are looking at these prices and you're seeing these really high prices. Keep in mind, these are places like New York City that are included in this report, and our prices here in Missouri tend to come down into this lower end of the range. So they also have a direct-to-consumer carcass, and this is not a live animal, this is a carcass, okay? So keep that in mind too. But if we were to sell even at this $5 range, if we looked at this $5 per pound, and we got $200 for our 40-pound carcass. Remember, we had a 90-pound ewe, so I broke that roughly in half to come up with that 40-pound carcass. we now have $112 additional over the auction price that we can get on this ewe. And remember, we also need to cover some added expenses. Because this is a carcass, we are now paying for processing. We also have to have transport. It takes time to market and find these consumers and that sort of thing. But this is also an option for finding some extra value in our cull animals.
Jennifer, it looks like we have a question from Amanda Taylor. I'm not sure if she sent it before you got on this slide, but she said, is there any factor difference for wool versus hair sheep?
Yes, there are. Wool sheep tend to be a lot heavier animals, and their prices tend to be a little lower per hundredweight, especially here in Missouri. I can't say that I have evaluated prices a lot across the country for wool sheep, mostly because I work in hair sheep here in Missouri. But yes, they are heavier animals and they will yield a heavier carcass.
Thank you. Amanda,
Okay.
did that answer your question?
Okay, there you go, the poll.
Thank you. So a three-year-old ewes often grade prime 1-2 in the auctions.
Okay, I think we're ready.
Okay. All right, so most of you got it right. Yes, it is false. Remember that our ewes actually can never grade prime because that is a quality grade that a mutton cannot have. And so we can have some yearling mutton, but not a 3-year-old. So it was a little bit of a trick question. I didn't use the same terminology that I did as we were talking about that. All right. Okay, so we're going to move into goats. Shoot, dang. Moving into goats. All right, so we don't get near as much data from USDA on goats. So there's not going to be near as many slides here on the beginning for goats, but this is FI is federally inspected. So this is federally inspected goat slaughter. They do report this monthly and by 1,000 head. You can see that our goat slaughter for 2024 has actually been above our 5-year average, which is pretty interesting because they had the same issues in 2020 and 2021 that we were not getting our imports that we typically get on our goat meat. And so to see that we're actually slaughtering goats above our average is pretty interesting news for the goat world. This trend actually started in 2024 or 2023 and just really kind of continued through 2024. If we look at our average weight for our goats, we started 2024 a little bit below our average federally inspected live weight, but we ended 24 well below our expected live weight. We tend to have heavier animals in the fall of the year. We tend to slaughter heavier animals in the fall of the year. There's less prime animals, I would say, that happen in the beginning of the year. Sorry, less prime animals in the fall of the year than there are in the beginning of the year. So when we look at our prices are pretty well right on track with our 5-year average. Which is a good thing for the goats. It seems like it's bad, but they really had an uptick over 20 and 2021. I also, again, use San Angelo, Texas. They are by far the largest goat auction in the country. And they really kind of set the prices for the rest of the country. But you can see that the last couple of years have been right on average. So we've been hanging pretty steady the last couple of years. If we put our average annual price into one graph over the last few years, you can see we had a big uptick over $1 a pound between 2019 and 2021. That's a significant change for our goat industry, considering that prior to that, we were steady for about 5 years, right about this 270 mark, 270, 275 mark. We did do some price correction in 22 to 23, and from 23 to 24, we really kind of stabled out here. If we add in those Missouri prices, we can see that we tend to follow what San Angelo is doing. Again, in 23, I'm not exactly sure why we have such a big disparity in 2023 between San Angelo and Missouri pricings. But in 2024, you can see we were back on track as where we tend to roughly run about 10 cents cheaper than San Angelo. And here's this crazy chart again. But now that you've seen it once, I think you kind of understand my madness as we look at this chart. So you can see in years that we had some really pretty significant year-over-year changes. 2015 was one of those years. 2020, 2021 was another one of those years. 22 and 23, we started having those price corrections. So prices were actually lower than they were the previous year. And now we're kind of starting to stable out. We have some months that are lower than the previous year, but some months that are higher than the previous year. And we're really starting to stable out. What I think is really challenging or interesting, I guess, maybe about this chart is if we look at 2021, at the average annual price swing, the seasonal price swing, it was crazy. So we were pushing almost $5 a pound or $500 per hundredweight in the beginning of 2021. And we were down to almost $300 per hundredweight or $3 per pound. So we're talking about a $2 price swing between the high of the year and the low of the year, which is really significant in that time frame. Typically, we're seeing this is more of our typical price swing in these years, and there's usually about a dollar price change, 78 cents to a dollar price change on there. And if we look at that a little closer, so this is our 5-year average from 2020 to 2024. And you can see that we have in the peak of the year, which for goats tends to fall in March and April, to the low of the year for goats tends to be July and August. Those are actually pretty similar, each one of those. But there's a 28% price swing between the peak of the year and the low of the year, or roughly 92 cents a pound, if we look at our 2024 average. And so if we're selling in March or April, we're pushing that 381 a pound. If we're selling in July or August, we're pushing that 281 a pound on the bottom end of that. All right, ready for the next poll, Homero?
Okay. Poll number 3.
This is another one of those trick questions. So this is which is the month with the lowest prices. If you could select more than one, you would get it right? Because there's definitely 2 months that have the lowest prices. So either one of those responses will be just fine. And I think we're probably got most of them. All right, so this is the lowest prices, and this is definitely for goats. And so some of you picked January, February. We've got May, June, July, August, September. And really the answer is that July and August. So if we back up one slide here, this is, remember, our seasonal price index on the goats. And so the lowest prices of the year tend to happen in July and August. Definitely our summer months. We see these seasonal price indexes because typically what happens is we have our lambs and kids in the spring of the year, so March and April. which means they tend to hit these market weights, 40 to 60 pounds, in the summertime. And oftentimes what happens is we have a large supply of sheep and goats in the fall, late summer, early fall of the year, which means that prices drop because we've got more supply and less demand. Most of our seasonal demand happens in late winter, early spring, and we do have some demand that tends to happen around Christmas as well for both sheep and goats. A lot of these follow some of the ethnic holidays, but not all of them. So,
Jennifer, we had a couple people, I guess maybe we went a little fast on that slide.
Maybe I did, yeah.
One person said their network glitched, but they're hoping to go back to the year-over-year trend.
The year-over-year trend. This one? Karen? Back further. Karen, if you want to unmute and ask your question, I'd be happy to.
Let me see if I can unmute her for you, because we have it where they
Gotcha.
unmute themselves. Let me see what I can do. Oh, maybe not.
Okay, I'm unmuted. Hi, Jennifer.
Hey, Karen, how are you?
I'm okay. And that is the slide. So I just wanted to do a screenshot of that. It's very interesting. Thank you.
You're very welcome. All right. Let's see. I gotta get, and I have 3 screens and I still can't manage to make it all work right. All right. So same as we did with the sheep, I want to talk a little bit about our goat carcass market terms. And one thing that is interesting about goats is that our USDA and US officials, they don't really take goats seriously, and it's very frustrating. I think we definitely need to get together and push on our USDA officials. But there is no official USDA designation for quality and yield grades in goats. What we do have is we have this institutional meat purchase specifications, and that is the closest thing we get to having designations. And this is essentially how people order sheep or order goat meat from their butchers, okay, and from their big suppliers. So essentially we have 3 selections, which you would see on any of your market reports. So we have a selection 1, a selection 2, and a selection 3. Selection 1 is a high proportion by weight of meat to bone. Selection 3 is a low ratio of meat to bone. Selection 2, you guessed it, falls right in the middle. To come up with a little more detail on this, and I took this out of that book that I just showed you, Selection 1 is a superior meat type confirmation. Keep in mind this has nothing to do with the amount of fat on the animal. This is all strictly about musculature of the animal. So it says they have to be thickly muscled through the body, as indicated by a pronounced bulging of the outside leg, a full rounded back strip, and a moderate thick outside shoulder. Selection 2s are an average meat type confirmation, have to have a moderate muscle throughout the body, as indicated by a slightly thick and slightly pronounced outside leg, a slightly full or flat or shallow, slightly shallow back strip, and a slightly thick to slightly thin outside shoulder. Selection 3 is an inferior meat type confirmation. The legs, back, and shoulders are narrow in relation with its length, and they have a very angular and sunken appearance. I do have this image, which I think is interesting because I'm pretty sure it's computer generated. This is not 3 different animals. If you look very closely by the markings on the face, this is the exact same animal. And if you look at its feet placement, it's in the exact same place, the tail head, everything's exactly the same. So I'm pretty sure this is a computer moderated image. But you can see our selection 1 is a nice rounded animal, right? We've got thicker here. We've got some bulging on the leg. We've got some bulging on this leg. Selection 2 is thinner. We're thinner through the top line and the loin up here. We do not have the roundness up here at the top. Selection 3 is very angular, right? We've got an angle at the shoulder. We're seeing the shoulder joint very well. Our legs have no bulging, no thickness whatsoever. We can see all back here and all the very angular motions. And so I try to do the same thing with our Missouri data for our does and nannies as I was able to do for the ewes. This is going to look a little different because truly there's just not enough data out there. But I pulled the selection 1s, the 1-2s, the selection 2s, the 2-3s, and the selection 3, and threw them in a graph. And it goes from 2020 to 2024. I'm showing you this section for a pretty good reason here, and I will unveil the rest of that here in just a second. So we do have distinct differences between our selection 3s and our selection 1s. Selection 1 in this orange is a much higher price than our selection 3s are, by about 50 cents per hundredweight, all the way up to over $1 per hundredweight in some times of the year. But as you can see, yes.
Sorry to interrupt. Just real quick, what was the book that the goat carcass market terms came out of?
It's the Institutional Meat Purchase Specifications.
Thank you.
All right. So back to this graph. As you can see, I didn't just suddenly stop graphing this data. There is no data here. And so the only thing left once all of our market reporters got used to reporting in the new way is the selection 1-2 data for Missouri. And so it's really hard to say, hey, you're going to get a premium from a selection 3 to selection 1 when there's no recent data to pull that premium from. But we know it exists. Just because they are not reporting it doesn't mean that we don't have selection 3s going through the auction, because they are most definitely going through the auction. Okay, so same as the sheep, we do on this national monthly grass-fed lamb and goat report, we do have a direct-to-consumer goat retail meat. Again, these high-end prices are probably not what we're going to see here in the Midwest or in Missouri. We are down closer to the lower side of this range. And also we have a whole carcass price down here, range between $6 and $21 per pound. And so if we sold our selection 1-2 doe in 2024 at auction and we received $115 per head, to compare that to our direct consumer pricing, it's $6 per pound for the carcass. That's roughly $240 for the 40-pound carcass. And that gives us roughly $125 to cover the added expenses of direct marketing. And that's having that animal processed, transport, marketing, etc. All right. I believe this is our last poll question.
Yes, it is. Number 4.
So, question 4 is USDA has established quality and yield grades for meat goats. True and false?
Cool.
Still got a couple people answering. All right, whenever you're ready, Homero.
Yeah, okay. I'm ready.
All right, most of you got it. Definitely false. USDA does not have established quality grades. They do use some common terms to help people understand, but they've actually not established any quality and yield grades. All right, let's see, we get back. All right. So some considerations when we think about increasing our cull animal income. Some questions that I think are good to ask yourself is the animal in good body condition? Are they reproductively sound? How old is the animal? Would the animal be a good fit for a different farms program? And so let me give you a bit of a scenario. If the animal is not in good body condition and is not reproductively sound, we might consider feeding that animal a little bit, getting it in a better body condition, and then sending it to auction to get it into a higher class, higher quality grade market class to get a little bit more money out of that animal. And I think that makes a lot of sense in years, especially when feed costs are not very high. In years that feed costs are really high, it probably makes more sense to cut our loss and just get the animal off the farm rather than feeding it. I ask if the animal is reproductively sound because if the animal is reproductively sound and say they breed just fine, they raise their babies just fine, they're good mothers, but maybe they just don't fit my program. Well, that animal might be a good consideration for a different farms program rather than being culled through the auction. And so those are kind of some of the things that I think about as we do that. And so as we think about increasing body condition, if we're in that mid-range on body condition, maybe we just take her to auction right away and be done with her and kind of cut the losses. If we're on the low end of our body condition score, that's really where we might consider feeding that animal. One thing that I noted as I was looking through here that I found very interesting and kind of pulling some of this data for y'all is that there doesn't seem to be seasonality in our mature sheep market. What I mean is we don't have high prices and low prices, high prices in January and low prices in July. We don't see that in our cull sheep market, right? Our mature sheep market. And so that means that if we decide to cull animals in July, then it's okay to take them and sell them, and probably in our best interest to taking them and selling them in July rather than holding on to them and increasing our feed costs on those animals. If we are reproductively sound, we might consider breeding those animals and then selling bred animals to another farm. And then, the third option is always to consider direct marketing to people who like meat from older animals. There are groups of people out there that like older meat from older animals. That didn't come out well. However, we also want to make sure that we're not sending, a body condition of 2 to be processed and then somebody being very upset because they didn't get as much meat as they thought they should, or reflecting badly on us as producers because the meat quality was particularly low.
We have a question, Jennifer, if you don't mind.
Yes, go ahead.
When selling goats, is there an advantage to live weight versus hanging weight prices? I have access to both buyers and so far have gone with the location that's closer just because of added fuel costs.
Say that one more time. So
when selling goats, is there an advantage to live weight versus hanging weight prices?
So the only way we can actually sell by hanging weight is if we are operating inspected meat, or if we're selling inspected meat. Can't find my dang meeting again. Lost you guys. And so as long as that meat has gone through the inspection process, whether that is state inspection or federal inspection, then we can sell by hanging weight. If it does not go through the inspection process, though, then we can only sell by live weight because we aren't allowed to sell meat that has not been inspected. So is it better to sell by live weight or carcass weight? Honestly, I would, if it were my choice, I would choose the price that's equivalent, right? If I have the ability to sell by carcass weight and I'm selling a whole carcass, then I would price my live animals in such a way that whether I'm selling by live or carcass, I'm receiving the same amount for my animal. Is that clear as mud? I can't find my meeting controls. Okay. Hello.
Yeah, we are here. Yeah.
Okay. I can't find anybody. All right. I hope that was clear. So selling live at auction, like I said, there doesn't seem to be a seasonal price trend for our ewes and does for our mature animals like we see in the kids and lambs. And so really marketing those animals as soon as possible, as soon as they are in the quality grade, the market grade that we're wanting them to be in, can reduce our feed and housing costs of those animals. And then I do have just a couple of resources for you guys to check out if you so fit. We for Missouri Crop and Livestock Enterprise budgets, MU Extension does put together a lot of budgets every year, whether that's in the livestock or crop realms. We do have sheep and goat budgets. And you can get these budgets in just a regular sheet like a PDF, or you can actually get the spreadsheet tool that I use to build these budgets. What's interesting about these tools is that it does allow you to go in and make it match your farm. So you can get a budget that's more closely tied to your farm than it is to what I predict every year. The other thing I really wanted to point out to you guys is this feedstufffinder.org. This did come out of a grant from the North Extension Risk Management Education Center through USDA. And this is a really handy tool to look up people selling and buying feed. So those that are buyers can go up and look at the listings of all kinds of different feedstuffs in and around your area, whether it's hay or different types of byproducts or different types of grain. We've got a lot of stuff in here. And with that, I'm happy to take any further questions, except that I can't see your questions because I can't find my meeting controls.
I can do questions for you if we get
Found
any.
you guys again.
Probably you stop sharing your screen. You will see everything.
I can do that. That one stayed on the screen. It's Monday and a new year. That's all I got. That's all I got, guys.
How those budgets work? Those budgets that you make.
I like them, but they are a lot. I will say that. See if I can pull one up here.
So Keith asked, do you know any producers trying to kid goats later in the season to match the price bump?
Yes, there are a lot of people that are trying to do that. We do have some seasonality. Seasonal anestrus is what we call it in sheep and goats. And essentially what that means is that our ewes are not releasing eggs, so they are not able to get pregnant, ewes and does. And so that tends to happen around the longest daylight days of the year. So think June 21, the summer solstice, and a few weeks on either side of that date. Sheep and goat are seasonal short day breeders, and so they breed in the fall of the year. So with that in mind, yes, we do try to do it. Some breeds are better for breeding out of season than others, and sometimes we can manipulate the ones that don't like to breed out of season a little bit through using seeders and some AI syncing technologies. That's where Homero and Mohan and Gabriel are really our best friends in talking about some of those procedures. But yes, we do have a lot of people that try to do that. Anecdotally, we've seen that oftentimes kids or lambs that are born in the hotter part of the year, for whatever reason, they don't seem to grow as well as their winter-born counterparts and early spring-born counterparts. Whether that's disease pressure on these animals or fly pressure on these animals or ticks or whatever it is, we know they don't grow as well. We don't know why they don't grow as well. And so there are some challenges that we haven't quite figured out as to why spring and winter born animals really work well.
So one person asked we could email them the links for the budget planners. If you'd like, you can send those. I sent him my Jam Lee. I sent you my email address, and if you want to send me an email, I'll get those from Jennifer and send those to you. Or if you want to put your email in, I'm sure she could send them to you.
I can also put them in the chat here.
Yes, please.
Okay. Yeah, that would be great.
Get it put up.
And for sure, we are going to have another webinar with the budgets and with all the things that you are doing, Jennifer. Yeah. Yeah, well, it's 5 o'clock, so the time just flew, and we are so grateful, Jennifer, for all your expertise and sharing all that information. A lot of numbers, but very good explained. I know that everybody are very pleased with your presentation, and thank you so much.
Do we have time for one quick question?
Yeah, sure.
Yes.
Would a decent kid market strategy be to be a little on the later side, then hold and feed longer?
Heath, I really think that depends on what your forage looks like and what your feed costs look like. So I give you an example of what I personally did on the sheep and goat side of things is I would kidder lamb in January. And then I didn't put in a lot of extra supplements to those animals. And they were on the heavier side of the weight range come again back to January. They were right at a year old. They hadn't lost any of their incisors yet, so their teeth kind of show their age. And so where I would market at, they would market them as kids or lambs. And so they would be on the high side of the weights and, fairly high side of the pricing. But I didn't put a lot of extra supplementation into them. Everything they did, they grew from their mom and from, what nature provided out there. You can do it the other way. You can kind of shorten them up. And, I've actually done it the other way when I had goats and we would be born in late December, early January, and I would push them really hard. They were on as much feed. The kids were on as much feed as they wanted, plus what mom had for them. And I was generally successful at getting them to about 50 pounds for a May marketing. And so they were off the farm by May. Now, I didn't hit the peak of the prices, but I also didn't carry them all year. And then that gave my does plenty of time on pasture to really get their body condition back up and going and rebreed for, that August cycle. So there's lots of different ways to do it, Heath. I wouldn't say that any one is the best way. It really depends on your feed sources and your farm setup and how much feed you want to push to these animals to kind of push them into certain markets, or hold them back from feed and let them grow on their own and do it that way. There's lots of different ways.
Awesome.
Okay, well, thank you. Just remember, next Monday, we are going to have our next webinar with Dr. Chris Bachman. He's a veterinarian, and he will be talking about how to start to establish or maintain a relationship with your veterinarian. That is very important. So we are going to have Chris here next Monday. Jennifer, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks,
yes,
all.
thank you everyone for being here.
Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year, everybody.
Thank you.